Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. We are delighted to welcome you during this wonderful week of Qatar Creates talks, celebrations of art and culture, and exhibitions. Thank you for joining us for this remarkable panel, Inside the Making of the Museum of Islamic Art. A talk that celebrates the grand institution that we are sitting within and celebrates its architect, IMP. This talk also will discuss the two exhibitions that celebrate the life and works of IMP, one at Ariwak and one at the Museum of Islamic Art. My name is Zara Khan, and I'm a curator of modern contemporary art at the Art Mill Museum.
Welcome everyone. My name is Aurélien Lemonnier. I am as well curator in the Art Mill Museum for architecture, landscape and design, and I curate with dear Zara the show here.
We'll start with the IMP Life as Architecture, presented in partnership with M Plus in Hong Kong. At Ariwak, this is the first retrospective of Pei's 7 decades-long career. It traces his life and work against the complex geopolitical realities and cultural legacies of the 20th and 21st centuries. IMP Life and Architecture offers the fullest presentation of his work ever assembled, and we're very proud and happy that it has now come to Doha.
In the meantime, here in the Museum of Islamic Art, you have case studies, an exhibition which is called IMP and the Making of the Museum of Islamic Art, from square to octagon, and from octagon to circle. For this exhibition, it was a collaboration between the Art Mill Museum, which is the future Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art, the Museum of Islamic Art, and Ariwak. This show is about the making of an institution, not only the making of a building, because as all of you know, to make a museum, you need 3 components: a building, a collection, and an audience. And that's what Zara and myself, we try to create in this great museum. I would like, before we start, to thank the lenders, Aslian, Dermitas, Hiroshi, and as well to make a great acknowledgement to Sandy Paid, who give to us, to the collection of Qatar Museum, extraordinary model, which are the base of the exhibition we have curated.
This panel is going to be moderated by Eric Chen, who will introduce each of these wonderful panelists properly, but I am here to introduce Eric. Eric is a curator, writer, and director of the Zaha Hadid Foundation, the London-based cultural foundation established by the late architect Zaha Hadid. Chen previously served as general and artistic director of the New Institute, the Netherlands National Museum and Institute for Architecture, Design and Digital Culture, professor and founding director of the curatorial lab of the College of Art of Design Innovation at Turin University in Shanghai, curatorial director of the Design Miami Fairs in Miami Beach and Basel, and lead curator of design and architecture at M Plus Hong Kong, where he oversaw the formation of that new museum's design and architectural collection and program. Chen was the co-curator of the exhibition IMP Life as Architecture in its original iteration at M Plus, and we are delighted to have him here today with us. Thank you.
So it's really a treat, I think, and a real privilege for all of us to be here in this remarkable building today, talking about this remarkable building, and with such a fantastic panel of speakers who played such pivotal roles in this building's realization. Now, it was 25 years ago that the commission for a new Museum of Islamic Art was given to I.M. Pei. Pei was then a sprightly 83 years old at that time. He insisted that this would be his last project. Of course, that didn't happen. There were still more to come. But in looking back 17 years after its opening, it's really, I think, really profound to think about what this museum has become in representing more than a museum building per se. On the one hand, as part of, as a museum for this incredible collection of art from across the Islamic world, the museum really manifested the emergence of Qatar as a not just regional but global hub for culture, media, diplomacy, and soft diplomacy, perhaps. On the level of architecture, this museum, you could say, helped solidify the fracturing of modernism by one of its leading protagonists of the 20th century, a fracturing of modernism's kind of universalist approach to architecture, but via still a rather essentialist and universalist interpretation of the regional. And in some ways, there's a paradox here that perhaps we can explore a little bit. But today we're going to focus mostly on the making of this museum. And to that end, we really have an incredible panel of speakers who can really lend some insight from all sorts of perspectives. We're really honored to have Shaika Al-Nasser, who is the director of the Museum of Islamic Art, who's been here since day one, or even before day one. Next to her is Hiroshi Okamoto, who is now a partner at OLI Architects in New York, but worked on this building with Pei from, and who worked for Pei from 2000 to 2012, if I'm not mistaken, Hiroshi. We have Azalahan Demartish, now of Kora Architecture, Design, and Research Office based in Istanbul, but who worked for Pei from 2000 to around 2009, 2010, also on this building. Next to her, Sandy Pei, who was with Pei since his very beginning as one of Pei's son, a noted architect himself and partner of Pei Partnership now in New York. And last but not least, Shirley Surya, the dynamo curator of the I Am Pei Life is Architecture exhibition, who I had the privilege of working with on the show in its first iteration at M+. Now, there's lots to talk about, but I think I have to start with Islihan, because we all just found out that this is the first time that Islihan has been back at this museum since its opening in 2008. And I think I just have to ask you, Islihan, what it's like to be back.
Hello. I asked Eric not to start with me, but if you went ahead,
You can
that's
handle
fine. Thank you for everyone for being here, and thank you everyone in Doha for making this possible, as well as M+ exhibition that actually paved the way also to this talk. As Eric said, it's my first time ever since the museum opened. I worked on the design of the Museum of Islamic Arts since 2000 with IMPE, and design and saw the entire process from sketch to a vibrant institution that is the museum today. And I have to say, I was very pleasantly surprised at how the museum right now has found its scale, its audience, its livelihood in a city like Doha, which is designed, which we are in right now, 25 years later. I can say that the building, or I can also say that Mr. Pei, I Am Pei, was able to foresee the scale and the vibrancy of Doha a century ago. Frankly speaking, I always felt it was a very large and monumental building for Doha when we were actually building it and when it was during construction. But I think it's the mastery of I Am Pei to be able to foresee the future and the future audience, and also the scale of a city from, quarter a century before. So that's my 2 cents, Eric.
Great, thank you, Azahan. Hiroshi, you were involved with the project from quite an early point. Maybe tell us a little bit about where the project was when you started working on it, and also what Doha was like, to Azahan's point.
Hi, thank you, Eric, and thank you for Qatar Museums and N+, and the audience here. It's a pleasure to be back. I myself have been coming back a little bit more often. After the museum, I also worked on the park, And then subsequently, we did a little bit of work on the 5th floor. So, but coming back, I guess just it always blows me away that the museum looks as good as it is. And as Aslan was saying, it looks better with people in it. The bustle and the activity really is something that brings joy, and also seeing people that I haven't seen in a long time, 25 years or 20 years. It's something that brings, I guess for me, there's a special place in my heart for Doha, you know, and the phenomenal growth is amazing. But I think, as Aslan was saying, the vision, even just driving through the Corniche from the airport, actually even before the airport, being on Qatar Airways and seeing the museum, it really is an iconic building. And iconic can mean many things. It can mean bad things as well. But in a true sense, it represents something. And I think it represents the city, and it also represents Qatar and the position, the global position of culture. And it's a privilege to be a part of it. Yeah.
Now, Aslan was saying how much Qatar has changed since 2008. It's changed even more since, I think, Hiroshi, you were here throughout the construction process. Maybe give us a little bit of a sense of what it was like to undertake such a massive and complicated building project on its own reclaimed island.
Sure.
During that
Yeah, technically very difficult. This area, as you know, was as you may not know, it was actually a container port. And it was a landfilled area, partially. If you draw a line through the cove around the peninsula, it was just kind of this diagonal line, almost about the 22.5 degrees that we see the building shifted. The 22.5 degrees is a very important component of the building, which is the angle of the octagon. So, but back then, when we first came, West Bay was maybe 3-4 buildings. There weren't many traffic lights, a lot of roundabouts. And there was a very small airport by the old airport area. So, but phenomenal kind of by Tor Construction, the Turkish contractor who had a lot of backing and a lot of goodwill, and yeah, a lot of goodwill. They almost built it 3 times, I think, while we were doing the construction, because there was a lot of trial and error. But I think the standards of the IMP office, and I know Sandy can speak to this, there's quite a lot of conceptualization, but also development and resolution where the documentation is very thorough. So as you see in this building, there's a geometric module. This is very much harking back to his kind of modernist, international modernist style. The 1080 module, it still sticks in my mind. Every time we come here, it's like the 1080 module. So, but everything is on a 3-dimensional grid. And it resolves itself, and sometimes it doesn't. And Mr. Pei would be like, the tyranny of geometry. What can we do? But we had a great team, and there was a lot of people working on it at the height of it. And for Mr. Pei, he was very good at putting the right people in the right place at the right time, you know, and it just shows, you know.
Yeah, I mean, as Hiroshi just mentioned, and Sandy, maybe you could talk a little bit more about this. Pei, your father has been considered this godfather of capital M modernism, but of course, you know, throughout his life and work, he was, he was not immune to the charms of locality and history and site specificity through a cultural lens. As well, people often talk about, you know, this project here in Doha as representing this kind of almost shocking regional modernism in Peizu, but it really began much earlier.
Well, yes, this is absolutely true. My father's career from the very beginning, actually going all the way back to the earliest days after he had left the real estate development, William Zeckendorf, and he started his own practice. One of the first projects that he did was the Fragrant Hill Hotel. Is it okay? Oh, can you hear that all right? No, it's Fragrant Hill Hotel in China. Other projects include the Bank of China in Hong Kong, the Suzhou Museum in Suzhou, and the what was the other? And the Miho Museum. All of these buildings, because these are reference local culture, are the genesis of form. He always did a lot of investigation, thorough investigation of the context and the culture behind these locations and programs. Many people think of just program as spaces that you are trying to design in a building, but he thought of program much more broadly and how it can impact the influence, be drawn from its local context, and then radiate out in what his solution is. I think this building is a manifestation of that. And one of the things that to go back to the original question that really impressed me about this building when I see it each time, is not only how people respond to it, but how I think it fulfills that broader vision that I just described, which is how architecture can really impact and inform larger communities. This building has become sort of the catalyst for the future of Doha. It has, from this building, has radiated an entire enthusiasm, interest, and focus on culture, on education, which is, of course, one of the principal missions of Sheikh Mosa, and really needs to be acknowledged as so important to Doha, but also for them to have selected my father, gone to my father for this project, I think gave him an opportunity to work in an area and in a culture and in traditions that he didn't know much about at the time. And he really he did a lot of studying before he even accepted the commission. Just like in the Louvre, for example, he declined, didn't decline, but when he was asked by the President of France, you normally say, yes, of course, when? And in that case, my father said, I need some time to think about it.
He was playing hard to get.
He was playing hard to get. And the result is what you see, where he did do a lot of investigation, many months before he came back to Mitterrand and said, I think I can do something. So I think that's the same situation we're talking about here in the museum. And I think I think that's why this project is particularly important to his career.
Now, Shirley, in sort of working on the exhibition, sort of what insights did you gain, or did we gain, from the sort of research project? Because there hadn't been a large scale exhibition of Pei before. He never wanted one. But diving into the various archives and archival materials that we were able to sort of get our hands on, what were some of the surprises for you?
Yeah, so it's really a privilege to be able to, I guess, kind of like dismantle a little bit of certain perceptions of Mr. Pei. I think even speaking to you, Aslihan, was a good exposure, because our impression, at least within the American architectural discourse in the 80s, and looking only at Fragrant Hill Hotel as the point of like so-called interpreting tradition, was not entirely fair, because it was a moment of so-called postmodern, and so any sort of thing to do with history or tradition becomes like an exercise of science being used on a building. But I think through our research, we wanted to have a much longer historical overview. So we went back as early as room 1 in the exhibition, where we really wanted to bring up about not only just on the level of what buildings he designed, but also the kind of climate, what it means to grow up in a colonial British Hong Kong, quasi-colonial Shanghai, and also having to go into a so-called very inward, not inward, but classical garden city like Suzhou. How do you bring in all these different so-called clash, right? How do you resolve differences? And then we noted the letter that we got when he tried to do his thesis for Harvard project. And in this letter, which we were also happy to quote, was that I am searching for a national or regional model. And this is 1940. This is way before critical regionalism and all of that, right? So it's not something to do with what the industry was looking for. It's personal. It's a personal search, conviction. And of course, in other interviews, he mentioned that it was, we love modern architecture. He believes in it. But there was no model for a specificity, whether it's a tradition, the way people live, particular ways of living. And so therefore, we are very glad that Mr. Pei is not a believer of the Chinese upturned roof as an identifier of culture, but went on the model of spatiality. So spatial experiences of the Chinese garden became pretty much the characteristic of that Museum of Chinese Art, right? It's really about how you move through the space and how you encounter the garden in relation to the Chinese works of art, which is, of course, works of antiquity, that you can call this so-called Chinese. Not in something you could see, or you could, like a form, but the way you go through a space. So that was revealing for us. And so we knew that we cannot just judge his projects purely on this kind of a very superficial form, but really look at it on the plan, on the level of the plan. And also looking at it as what you said until now, I so benefit from Aslahan's interview, which is, so it is a mixture of archival, but also oral history that really helped us to kind of put the pieces together. You said that Mr. Pei always looks for the essence, and we all hate the word essence, right? We all think that essence doesn't exist. But I think we try to redefine what that meant in practice, which is basically trying to derive a formal logic. Thank you, Aslahan, I quote you for that. A formal and spatial logic from a particular archetype of tradition in a way that fits a modern or contemporary program, whether it's a museum, whether it's other sort of buildings. So that becomes almost like an understanding that it's not purely copying, pasting, emulating, but a process of understanding what am I designing for, but what can I derive from that is logical, not just formal. So I think that's what we felt was a very important discovery. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Shirley. Now, of course, there's a sort of famous narrative of this museum where, once Pei had agreed to take on this commission, he did a trip around the region because he acknowledged that he was not an expert on Islamic architecture. He went really, I think, all over, from like Fatehpur Sikri in India to Cordoba and Granada in Spain to Isfahan in Iran. He started to sort of get a sense of this essence of Islamic architecture that he was looking for at the rabats of Monastir and Sousse in Tunisia. But it wasn't until he arrived in Cairo and beheld the Sabil at the Ibn Tulun mosque that he had a bit of an aha moment. And it was after that point that I think Aslahan, you joined the team, and part of your job was to help Pei translate, these observations that he had made into a design, into his diagrammatic design for this museum. Maybe could you tell us a little bit more about this process of translation and how that worked? Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe it's, I don't know if it was a translation, but because I joined the team, and I also want to pronounce my colleague's name here, Perry Chin and Tosan Lim, who's in the audience right now. My colleagues, we started from 2000, and we were the core team when I joined. And it was interesting to see that I think with IMP there was a real curiosity. There was a genuine interest in the local logics of space, of the way of constructing and inhabiting space. And also there was a very sensitive approach to the aspirations, future aspirations. So therefore, it's very important to frame this building and its references, not in terms of tying it back to historical references, but to position the building in a tradition of a culture, as well as in a future aspiration and a future position with which the country sees itself and defines itself within the history of this culture that it actually thinks it's inheriting. So this was very important, and I think IMP was a person like this also. You know, he was a very true modernist, and he believed in progress. And today, we actually are looking back into these modernist principles and modernist aspirations, and we actually can go back and criticize them or look at it from a critical point of view, because the world during the 1950s, we live in a different world right now. But the principles were that there are universal principles along with all our historical memories and traditions. So how do you build a building in Doha, Qatar, that is going to tie it to its own culture within the region, in the culture that the Islamic cultures have produced, as well as how do you position it in the kind of the progress that that we see that in 25 years that Doha has caught up with the building in a way. So it was very interesting, and he was genuinely curious of how buildings were shaped, lived, what the materials were. I remember one time we did a model, and then we had a photo shoot, and then the photos came back, and then he looked at it and he said like, oh no, this looks like Istanbul in the morning. It's very misty. This is not Doha sun. So for him, it was very important. He was very he could calibrate his mind to the kind of the sun, the wind, and the kind of coordinates of where he was actually building. It mattered to him so much. And I think today the building is very well anchored in the light of Doha, in the sea of Doha. You know, it feels from here, because it doesn't talk necessarily of mimicking any kind of motifs, or although we do have ornamentations in the building, but they are mostly they're logical, they're structural, they're rational. And I had just graduated from the program of Aga Khan Islamic Architecture at MIT. And when Mr. Pei would ask me what is Islamic architecture, I would say there's no such thing. It's a construction of the West. It's a category. You know, we don't call Christian architecture, or we don't have European architecture. Why do we call Islamic architecture? You know, because Al-Andalus is very, very different from the Ottoman Empire. So therefore, we would have all of these conversations. So as we were designing, we were going through all of these, and soon later, as Shirley was mentioning, I realized that he was trying to gauge the kind of the logics, and also to suspend it in between reference and also future design. So yeah, so I think I feel we have succeeded. I don't know, the audience will tell.
No, I think you could definitely call this building a success, of course, but um, uh, to make this panel a success, I have to say that I think you're all being a little bit too polite. Uh, we need a little bit of a little bit of behind the scenes, a little bit more of the behind the scenes gossip. Hiroshi, maybe we'll, every building, well, you know. A project as complicated as this, of course, would experience challenges in its construction. It's impossible to believe now, but Hiroshi said that back in the day when this was being built, supply chains weren't what they are now, of course, and there were times when they ran out of screws and had to have them flown in from Dubai. But
Hilti nail gun, nails.
Nails, sorry. But there were other challenges in the construction. Maybe you want to tell us about those. You mentioned a steel drama, or maybe the concrete drama.
Sure. I think the concrete, as you all know, have you seen through IMP's career, concrete it's one of his kind of primary materials, favorite materials, as well as stainless steel, glass. Refined materials and detailed in a refined way. But concrete is a very honest material, especially cast in place concrete, and he had a lot of experience through his career. Yeah. And we had great consultants as well. But when we first started this project, with IMP, and Aslan was talking about how the building had to be the right color. So although he loved Mani de Louvre is not hard enough for the outside. So when we went to Burgundy for limestone, we also looked at travertine, which was it was a no-go from the beginning. We went to Chamisson, which is a harder limestone that mimics the Mani. Inside is the Mani. But also the concrete, because of kind of the texturing, he wanted this more monolithic look. And what you see in the inside, in the atriums, all those domes, they were actually originally, and Tosan knows this, Tosan is here in the audience, they used to be square until we tendered the building, and then he came back and he told Tosan, I think we should make it round. So, which we almost had a heart attack, but we do these programs, and he's, if you look at from his kind of modernist to the brutalist phases. And if you look at some of these amazing buildings like the Iverson Museum, concrete is one of his favorite materials. And so he knew that we wanted to use colored concrete. White cement was something that in some countries are not allowed to be used structurally because of the heat of hydration. It's easier to crack. Etc. But we use the white cement with confidence and with the type of mixtures that we can get into the weeds, but a lot of admixtures for this environment, the heat, the nighttime pouring, etc. So the program that we create usually in the specifications is we start with small samples, a little bit bigger samples, full-scale mock-ups of every type of situation of a light fixture, dome, a corner panel. I think there's about 295 something different types of panel forms on the ceiling. So it's quite complex. And as we go along, the forms were made out of fiberglass in Dubai. And I was asked to go and take a look, go and inspect. So every week we're going somewhere to inspect the material. And I thought it was going to be this automated, beautiful, pristine factory workshop. And it was kind of the industrial area. It was open air. There are kind of plastic enclosures fluttering in the air and birds flying through. And we see these molds being made. Sure enough, they came here, and there was a lot of problems with the heat of the molds kind of shrinking, etc. But we got through that problem, and everyone was very excited. After the trials, usually we'll do a first pour mock-up, in-place mock-up. And that's usually in a place where if you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world, or it's probably the place that you would want to make a mistake. And this is in the loggia entrance at the education wing, so outside before the library. It's kind of a contained area. And I remember before the pour, everyone's excited about it. Everyone's looking, because this is the big thing, you know. You see it in the models, you see it in the drawings, you see it everywhere. And we started pouring at night, and I remember like the whole team, there was about, the contractor team, about 170 engineers, maybe 100 plus people, 1,000 workers at the height of construction, but the whole team came out. And when you watch concrete being poured, it's pretty boring, you know. You have 10 minutes, it's enough, but. And then we cured, and it's like Christmas, we're waiting, you know, opening a present. And because it's a ceiling panel, we had to shore it, and you have to wait several days to make sure it reaches at least 70% before you can pop the forms, etc. So in anticipation, Mr. Pei's like, how's it going? Oh, we haven't released the forms yet. Well, let's see. And sure enough, the day comes, we pop the forms, everything is green. Like Grinch green, like, yeah. And what turns out is that we used an admixture, the replacement of some cementitious material that's slag. So slag is a byproduct of iron smelting, you know. And the slag is used in many concrete mixes. It's a hardener. It gives workability. It's definitely very good for this environment, but it actually reacted with this environment, and that's why it turned green. So we did a lot of studying. I had to give a call to Mr. Pei. He started saying, whose fault is this? And I remember Perry also asking me, what happened? So it turns out that it is a common phenomenon in certain cases because the forms were so tight and it was in place for so long, the reaction was greater. And it actually slowly dissipates. So that was one of our first pours, end of 2004, beginning of 2005. The building was finished in 2008, so it took about 3 years. But you can still go out there and you can still see the green color in that area. Yeah.
Shaika, did you know this, that you almost had a green museum? Yeah. I'm sorry it's taken us a while to get to you, but as Aurelian said earlier, to make a museum you need a building, a collection, and an audience. So far we've only really spoken about the first, but of course you are the most qualified to speak of the latter two. I mean, you really were with the museum since like really day one, when it was just this incredible collection, but in storage. I mean, what were your expectations of the museum in those early days, and what were the broader expectations of it in the wider community here?
So when I first started working in the Museum of Islamic Art, I didn't know about the building. Haven't seen the building itself. Only the concept of projects that's under development that interest me to work in the museum. And I remember very vividly when we entered the museum for the very first time. We were working in a remote storage areas with huge box with no windows, and we were filled with excitement to see where our offices will be and where we will be rehousing the collection. And we were overwhelmed because we come from an offices with no windows to an office with a sea view. It was like a wow moment for us, and when we also saw the museum and the atrium with the huge windows, light and shadow, it's something that we haven't seen before in Doha. the building really it's a landmark that we were very proud of to have in Doha. It's the first of its kind. The landscape, the architectural landscape of Doha before the museum was modest, except for the Corniche, except for the Sheraton that has a bit of iconic design, but the rest were very very practical buildings. And I think the Museum of Islamic Art led the wave of developing of the cultural institutions in the region with an iconic design. As locals, we were very excited and proud of the Museum of Islamic Art to an extent that at certain stage, once the museum opened, we started receiving some criticism. Because the museum did not speak about Qatar's history and culture, and people wanted to connect to it. It talks mainly about Islamic art and history, but once after the opening of the National Museum, this criticism started fading away, and now with the National Museum and the Museum of Islamic Art being in parallel, they tell a perfect story in harmony.
Great. Now you've made some changes to the building over the years. Maybe tell us a little bit about that and how well the building has adapted to those changes, or vice versa.
So we've done a major renovation project for the museum. We called it the relaunch. We've worked on it for around 6 years. We've closed the museum for around 18 months and then reopened the museum in October 2022, just before the FIFA World Cup. And the main goal of the relaunch project is to enhance the visitor experience and to move beyond the aesthetic display of the objects and to add more context for the objects, to tell the compelling stories behind the objects and provide more content and using different media. And one of our primary goals also for the relaunch is not to change the museum architecture, look and feel, only to enhance the visitor experience. So we've changed the storyline, we've added more content, interactive, also very subtle multimedia that will not overtake the display of the objects. And also we've reutilized the spaces that haven't been used before. For example, there was this majlis area just beside the entrance of the museum, and we've turned it into a 3D projection room that tells the story of how IMP was inspired to design the building. And the main reason why we've dedicated this room is we find out many visitors come to the museum mainly for the architecture and only the architecture. They come to the atrium, they go to the east and west courtyard, and they leave. So we've dedicated this room to them beside the entrance so they can hear the story of the museum. And also we've changed the fourth floor. There was this multimedia room that haven't been used, and we've turned it into a temporary exhibition space, and now it's where we are having IMP exhibition on the fourth floor. So far, we've been hearing quite positive feedback about the relaunch project. We've been noticing the visitors engaging more with the objects, connecting also with it, and after they visit, they've learned something about Islamic art and history.
Thank you. Do we have time for a question or two, Yelena? Or 10 minutes? Oh, okay. Are there? Yes, gentleman right in the middle. Do we? No. Yes. There's your answer.
Sorry. No, I'm coming with the mic. If you can just pass it on. Thank you so much for the excellent moderation and the wonderful panel. My name is Ali Lo'ou. I'm a professor of architecture and urbanism, and I just published a book about architecture and urbanism in contemporary Qatar, where the museum was an essential part of my analysis. But I had a mysterious component in this analysis, which is basically related to, as you all know, there was a huge international competition before handing the project to Mr. Pei. And this competition has excellent architects. I mean, Zaha Hadid, Richard Rogers, Charles Correa from India, and a very famous Arab architect, also Rasim Badran. I was not able to see the sort of the turning point from why the museum, the competition solutions were rejected, and then the project was handed to Mr. Pei. As you rightly said, he was not aware of Islamic architecture, and so on and so forth. Some of the interpretations that I was able to put my hand on was related to some of the outcomes of the competition was radically contemporary, like the case of Zaha Hadid and Richard Rogers, and also Rasim Badran was too much into copying and pasting from the traditional heritage. So any insights regarding this mysterious turning point, I would highly appreciate. Thank you so much.
Aurelian?
Thank you for your question, my dear, because it's not out of the panel, but it's the first chapter of the exhibition, which is here. And in the exhibition, we have indeed all the competition organized by the Aga Khan in the 97. You will discover some of the drawing. You will discover as well some témoignages from people such as the Aga Khan manager who explain, because we made a large film, Digital Experience, part of Qatar Museum made a large film and interviews, most of you, by the way, but as well other people, which explain what happens. So I suggest you to visit the exhibition in 2 days when it's open. But it's true that there was a change, and this change is explained by Luis Montreal. It's okay?
Any other questions? Yes, the lady.
Thank you for this great moderation. My name is Laura Bouhala. I'm a lawyer in intellectual property. Actually, I'm a big fan of Museum of Islamic Art. I always come here several times. I'm a resident in Qatar, and I'm proud to be in Qatar to witness this beautiful piece of art. And I'm glad that Mr. Pei has the opportunity to be the one who was selected to design, even though he doesn't have the experience in Islamic art, but he proved that he is the one to be on this project. So thank you for being here. I want to add something very important, that Oriental art and Islamic art are very important to enhance the culture of the GCC countries, and especially of Qatar and all the Arab world. I want to ask you about the sacred geometry that was used several times. I always come to Mia, always see the impact of sacred geometry, which was used by the Sufism and by all the Arab philosophers. So what it's about it, and how Mr. Pei was grounded to use this sacred geometry. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your lovely comments, and it was a pleasure hearing from you that you have a sense of belonging to this building, living in the region. Geometry is, it's a very layered question, and I think it begs for a layered answer. I think geometry, personally, is our way of really understanding the world. And it spans many cultures. And the Islamic culture, specifically, and I always have a hesitation when I say Islamic, as I explained, so I use it for the lack of a better word, has a very deep relationship with geometry. And oftentimes, the geometric patterns are a way, are guides, construction drawings, are diagrams in order to build a very three-dimensional architecture. So in a lot of the times that we see something that is like an ornament, it looks very geometric and it looks like an ornamentation, although many of the times those drawings have a logic for construction, for spanning a certain kind of a transition, like transitioning from a square to a dome, right? Like we see in this building in a very three-dimensional version, which is basically we have a plan and you have 4 columns and then it goes upwards. So you start with a square and from a square you go transition. Specifically speaking, with Turkish triangles, you transition to an octagon, and then from an octagon, you reach a spherical or like a round, tessellated round form. So in a way, the symbolic part aside, I mean, there are a lot of meanings that are adhered towards geometry, because it is our way of trying to maybe resolve the mysteries of our planet. I mean, it's a human language, the geometry is a way to grasp the world. The way we have also used geometry, and IMP before this building was always interested in geometry. I mean, he did complain about tyranny of geometry, but he's also the person who would always introduce a geometrical module that would definitely define the principles of the building that he was going to build, and all of and it would guide and unfold the architecture. So it wasn't that the design would happen in different kinds of steps, but he would actually have the whole logic, geometric and volumetric logic of the building set out in its geometrical, three-dimensional geometry. So I think when Mr. Pei saw Ibn Tulun's mosques, Sebil, he saw a couple of different things. One of them was that there was a volume that he felt that he could engage with, that he knew how to speak with. So it was important that he would engage from a point where he would understand, that he would understand the geometrical logic, he would understand how that volume would act with the sun, with the time, with temporalities, with time passing through. So, and then also he saw that that building stood in a vast courtyard, which basically actually, I think it made him to choose a site which was in the middle of the water. And we see that today it actually does stand in a vast, non-populated space, surface. So, so the geometry is, I don't know if I answered your question correctly, but I think it's a very rational way of engaging with the culture, and also for IMP not to imitate anything, but to come to find a place from his own practice to speak to the culture of the region. Thank you.
I was just told we have time for one more question. Yeah. I think the gentleman in the back popped his hand up first. Sorry.
Thank you so much for a beautiful talk. My name is Ahmed Sami Angawi. I'm a son of an architect. And of course, I'm a very big fan of MP and everybody else in the building. And who am I to say something about the design? But I cannot to help to think, I would like to hear it. When designing an Islamic museum, not only the act of showing object within that museum and what it carries as a function, and the inspiration that Mr. MP took from the beautiful mosque from around the Islamic world, from Ibn Tulun and so forth, you cannot help to see most of the elements are there. But from the act of prayer, by itself. I was wondering where is the mosque within the Islamic Museum, and if that was part of the brief or not. I think if I'm not mistaken, there is a room for prayer, but I just wanted to see that process of Mr. Impey and how he thought about it in the building. Was the building itself shifted in the direction of Qibla? You mentioned that it shifted in the angle of the octagon. And maybe that small act of prayer within the building, for me, I think is very valuable point to see and understand from your point of view. Thank you.
This might be an Aslihan question again. Although, Shaika, you told me before that at the beginning there was some confusion over whether this was a museum or a religious building. Is that right? Yeah.
There was lots of people were considering the museum as a sacred building, and it was very difficult for us to have any concert or music we will receive also. But then we have to clarify this is an art museum that speak about Islamic art and history. So to answer, there is a mosque in the museum, and one of the new projects is also to have within the park a dedicated mosque within the premises of the museum in the future.
I'm going to add a tiny, I'm going to follow your, there are two masjids, one for men and one for women, obviously. And I remember when we were designing it, we consciously made the women's masjid larger. And because we were also briefed that the women would also take time, personal time, and to socialize in that space. So it was a prayer room, but also a social space for women to be able to get together and then, to spend kind of like some resting time there. So for orientation to Kaaba is the masjids are oriented towards the Kaaba, but the building has a different angle.
Well, I think on that note, we're unfortunately out of time. There's, of course, a lot more that can be asked and said, but I want to, well, first of all, thank Yelena for bringing us all together, and to thank Shaika for both being a fantastic speaker and for hosting us here at your beautiful museum. Thank you, Hiroshi, Aslihan, Sandy, and Shirley, and thanks to all of you for coming. And of course, please check out the making, Aurelian and Zara's making of MIA show on the 4th floor here, opening Wednesday. Is that right? Thursday. As well as IMP Life is Architecture opening at Al Rawak on Thursday. And of course, in the meantime, there's the amazing immersive space here already that allows you to really get into the mind of Pei and the references that he look to for this building.